Hi Year 4 and welcome to our history lesson for today. So we have found out now where Pompeii is in Italy, and we're going to jump back in time to the actual moment when the city of Pompeii was completely buried in the ash from the volcano. Okay, so we are back now in 79 AD, and the picture that you can see here is the city of Pompeii. And in the background, you can see Mount Vesuvius. You can see the Bay of Naples, and this is an artist's impression of what the city would have looked like at that time. This information here just helps to set the scene to understand what the city of Pompeii was like and who it was ruled by. So Pompeii is first mentioned in history in 310 BCE. Just to remind you that BCE is before the Common Era or before Christ. So it's before 0. So it was first mentioned in history in 310 BCE, when during the Second Samnite War, and that's when there were tribes fighting against the Romans who were trying to take over their land, and a Roman fleet landed at the Sarnus port of Pompeii, and from there they made an unsuccessful attack on a neighbouring city. Now, Pompeii wasn't happy with Rome and with the Romans coming and trying to take over, so they actually joined the revolt against Rome. Unfortunately, in 89 BCE, they were besieged by the Romans. That means that they were taken over. Now, after the war, Pompeii, along with the rest of Italy, south of the Po River, received Roman citizenship. However, as a punishment for Pompeii's part in the war, so for revolting against Rome, a colony of Roman veterans ruled. So the people of Pompeii were now ruled by Rome. And Latin replaced Oscan as the official language. So the people of Pompeii, not only had they been taken over by the Romans, their language was replaced as well. And the city soon became Romanized, which means it was taken over so that the architecture and the culture became Roman. Okay, so 79 AD, as we know, Mount Vesuvius erupted and it completely devastated the city of Pompeii. Now, when we think about history, we have to think about how do we know this? So what we're going to have a look at now over the next few slides is how do we know what happened in Pompeii? Because the videos that we've been watching over the last couple of days, they are modern videos of the events, but that information has to come from somewhere historically, and we have to think about our sources of evidence. So there are actually some eyewitness accounts of the eruption of Mount Vesuvius. And one of the accounts is a vivid eyewitness account from a young man called Pliny. And he was a Roman administrator and poet. And he wrote many letters about the eruption of Mount Vesuvius, which have been preserved over time. And they give us some understanding about what happened. And it's through him that we can gain insight into the reactions and feelings of the people caught up in the drama of this natural catastrophe and exactly what the eruption looked like. So this is an actual account from one of his letters. The eruption resembled a pine tree. So he's here describing the ash coming out of the top of the volcano. For it shot up at a great height in the form of a trunk, which extended itself at the top into several branches. So if you imagine That's a huge plume of ash coming out of the top of the volcano like the trunk of a tree and then branching out as it got higher and higher. It was at one moment white and another dark and spotted, as if it had carried up earth or cinders. And this is what completely covered the city of Pompeii. So the devastation, this is now about what happened to the people who were in Pompeii. This happened very quickly, this covering in ash, so that people couldn't escape. So they were scalded by superheated ash. Smoke and poisonous gases filled the air, which suffocated people. Buildings and people were crushed by the huge rocks that were thrown out of the volcano. And volcanic ash and pumice rocks rained down on Pompeii, which buried the city. Pompeii remained buried under a layer of pumice stones and ash, which was 6 to 7 meters deep. And the city's sudden burial protected it. It's almost like if you imagine something frozen in ice for the next 17 centuries. So that's 1,700 years. This here is an image of one of the streets in Pompeii. And this is because architects have been able to, archaeologists have been able to excavate and unearth the remains of Pompeii. And this arrow here, the red arrow, gives you an idea of how deep the ash would have been. It would have completely covered the city. The ash that buried the city and its people preserved everything where it was at the time of the disaster. And this is another piece of evidence now that we know helps us to be historically accurate. So because things were preserved at the actual time of the disaster, it helps historians to understand a bit more about Roman life, what life was like, a snapshot of the city of Pompeii in 79 AD. Archaeologists found cavities or holes around the skeletons of some of the people they found in Pompeii. And these holes were where the bodies of these people had once been. And what the archaeologists did is they poured plaster into these holes and they made casts of the people. And these casts, if you were to go to Pompeii now, which you can do, you can go and look at the city of Pompeii, the ruins, you will find these casts of people dotted around Pompeii, showing where these people were when they were hit by the pyroclastic flow, which was this huge flow of ash. And here, this is an image of some archaeologists excavating now around these plaster casts of the bodies of the people of Pompeii. Okay, so your task. Your task is to write down 5 questions you have about this image. So this is an image of one of the plaster casts of one of the people of Pompeii. So I'm interested to know what 5 questions you have about this image. It might be that you want to ask, what was this person doing? Because remember, this is a frozen in time image of what actually was happening. It might be that you have questions about exactly how these casts were made. So I'm just interested to know, what are your questions? If you would like to discover how the casts of the people of Pompeii were made, then there is a link here to a video about how archaeologists did it and when they did it. I'm not going to show you the video because I want you to make the choice about whether you watch it or not, because it is very sad to see and to understand about how people were buried alive, essentially. So, but it's equally historically very interesting. So the link is here, and I'll put it on the website. And if you'd like to look at it and find out about how archaeologists and when they made these plaster casts, then you can choose to watch that link. Okay.